Hello, everybody, and welcome to a special edition of the Bondex Spaces. And we're joined by a special friend and advisor, Tal Collin. Tal, please request to be a speaker so we can bring you up here to the stage. There we go. Hello, Tal. Where are you calling from
Hey, how's
today?
it going? I'm in Miami. I'm in Miami today. Where are you calling in from, Ignacio?
London. It's been rainy and sunny all in one day, London style. I bet Miami is nice and warm right now.
Yeah, Miami is warmer is the cold part of the day. It's getting hot.
Very nice. And this is a very special guest. Tal is a close friend of Bondex and has been one of our advisors for a long time. And he is the ex-CEO of Kraken in the US, one of the most well-known exchanges in the world. Tal, maybe you can give us a little introduction about yourself.
Sure. And thanks Ignacio for inviting, and thanks everyone for joining and listening. Hopefully I can get you some new insights and new learnings and stuff that'll be cool and helpful for you in whatever you do. So yes, as said, I was the CEO of Kraken US, the regulator and customer facing entity in the Kraken group. And I did that under the Gary Gensler regime, which was a very interesting time and very stressful. What we're experiencing now since Trump has taken over and has brought in crypto-friendly regime is something that could not have been imagined back then. The day I joined Kraken, I received the SEC versus Kraken lawsuit, which was very much a copy paste of SEC versus Coinbase and SEC versus others that has since been thrown away. But you can imagine that it's not the best of welcomes to join a new organization and get such a lawsuit. But
Wow.
it is what it is, and I found it fascinating to work on the regulatory side of the business of the crypto industry. And since leaving last year, I've met a range of amazing projects that are doing amazing stuff and finding a lot of traction and creating a lot of value. And for the ones that I really got impressed by, both by the team and the vision, like Bondex and Ignacio, I offered to join as an advisor. And I've been following Ignacio for probably the better part of the year, and just seeing how he leaves the business, throws Bondex, does very interesting strategic moves to grow it, and position themselves to be the leading reputation and authority entity in the Web3 space, which is something that doesn't exist.
Thank you for the kind words, Tal. And wow, I cannot imagine you coming to a new job at a new spot with a hostile regulatory environment. But wow, I mean, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. And yes, they're having a much easier time over there now. Now they're throwing every single lawsuit away. But wow, incredible time to be at the helm there. You've also seen a deep crypto winter while you were there, and also I guess, the post-COVID bull market. So you've also seen a change of cycles during your tenure there, right?
So I was my tenure there was not that long. I didn't go through a full 4-year cycle, much shorter than that. But I've been in the industry since 2017, so I've been following it from I've seen two full cycles, and I got to tell you that in my first cycle, I didn't know it was a cycle. It looked like, to me, it looked like the end of the industry. And it's only in the second cycle that I realized that, okay, this is the cycle of crypto, and winter is a season. It could be a tough season, and it could be a long season, but it's a season, and it's, then superseded by spring and then summer and vice versa.
Super interesting. Yes, we are, as Bondex, we've been building for 4 years now, and we've missed two previous windows to list, and we're looking to make this window, which now the market is looking on decent conditions, and active exchanges are getting better and better, and the US is becoming more active as a player as well because of the environment improving as well. But you've been on the other side, the exchange side. So I'd love to know a few lessons, from the Kraken side. You guys are, the exchange that all the OGs love because famously it has never been hacked. And I think it's got one of the best reputations in the industry. So I'd love to, yeah, just so what were some of the lessons that you learned from Kraken, main takeaways from running an exchange?
Yep. First of all, happy all-time high, guys. We're just celebrating that as we speak. I think that a lot of good things are happening now, or at least so you missed two windows. Windows in crypto are demanding, right? There's like, it's a very short window. It's not that easy to get into it. And a lot of things can stop you. There's the market dynamics, there's the regulatory dynamics, there's the market flavors. So yeah, if you had a GameFi company currently, you're probably one a full cycle late. So it's very much dependent, but it's you guys have been building and your narrative it came along with the right timing for the industry. So I think your timing is very, very good. I'm a big believer that if you build and you put your head down, build in winter, and then get ready for summer. This is what it looks like. We've been building throughout winters, and you've gotten here in the summer, and what looks like it's going to be a nice summer.
Totally agree. I think that, in crypto, we're living at the peak of the attention economy in society. And I think it's quite exhausting. And especially in crypto as an industry, we have like extra ADHD and everyone's kind of chasing the flavor of the month. And it's usually unsustainable as an investment strategy, but also in terms of building a business with longevity, right? And we've been building and sticking to our vision and sticking to fundamentals of, more of, think it's traditional ventures, right? Users, traction, solving real problems, solution sets, and, generating revenue and finding product market fit. And I think finally, the market is beginning to mature as an industry, realizing that it's not all about marketing and hype, and that does not sustain the value of a token or a project long term. Yeah, you're right. I think we're finally, getting a little bit of credit for what we've been building for so long, and so diligently. And regarding that, which is what we want to do, and going back to, I think we're living in this exhausting attention economy, right? We're full of distractions, and we're also overwhelmed with data and noise, and it's really hard to know who to trust and what to trust. We want to use blockchain as a trust infrastructure through reputation, to enable a signal through the noise to navigate the internet better, both Web 2 and Web 3. So I want to know, from the perspective from when you were at Kraken, how do you view reputation, right? When it was institutional and building, trust across listings or partnerships with other projects and ecosystems or chains. How do you view reputation in general and trust?
It's a great question, and I think that this is we're all here on this call because we love Web3, but we really live in the non-Web3 world. And in the non-Web3 world, in the real life, trust is a big thing. You need to trust ecosystem, right? You need to trust whether it's your currency, your bank, whether it's your boss or employee, whether it's your parents or kids, whether it's your partner or friend. You need to trust. And we've developed over whatever, right? Millennials, we've developed ways of getting to know how to trust people. So, you do this, I do that. We ask a question, we communicate. So there's a very strong trust mechanism that's been developed over. Web3 is new. We haven't had forever. And Web3 is also, brings with it a lot of complexities because it's very convenient to be an Anon in Web3. How can you trust an Anon? I mean, the Anon can be a great person. It could be a horrible person. It could be anything in the middle. When we looked at it in Kraken, Kraken does business with many, many types of counterparties, right? Be they clients, be they regulators, be they partners, be they projects. So suppliers, you need to trust who you're doing business with. And in some places, we always say trust but verify. So in some instances, for example, on compliance, if I wanted to onboard any one of you to Kraken, I need to make sure that I can trust you, that you're not a negative and nefarious actor, right? So that you're not a criminal, you're not associated to a country that's in the blacklist of countries that you don't have any history that would jeopardize me, my license, my company, my other clients. So this is the kind of stuff that I would need to do. So there's ways to do that for compliance of when you onboard all new clients, and there's compliance procedures. Kraken didn't invent those. They're regulators set in each country with criteria and you need to follow them. And there's also trust that is on a different level. That is trust. Who do you trust, right? Bondex is about to get listed. Do exchanges trust Ignacio and the team that they will act in good faith and build the project responsibly to the best of their ability? Nobody's asking for a guarantee, but they're asking to know that these are the good guys, right? The good guys and gals that we can trust investment with or money with or whatever. So that is, I think that goes closer to what Bondex is doing, right? Because when you try to evaluate a business, when you evaluate Google and you ask yourself, okay, do I buy Google advertising or do I use a Google tool? That is a Web2/real world question. But when you deal with people who are in crypto, whether it's a project like Bondex or a DeFi project or anything else, you really need to trust the counterparty and do the verification as much as you can beforehand.
So that's interesting. I know you listings is just one of the verticals of an exchange, right? There's liquidity, there's compliance, customer facing, product, interface. But in terms of the listing process, what are some of the things that you would say the listing team looks at when they evaluate a project before allowing them to trade on an exchange? Because I believe that a lot of that is really based actually on the trust, right? That the project is able to establish.
So first of all, you're right. There's a lot of aspects, verticals, touch points between an exchange and the world. And they extend to the list that you mentioned and well beyond anything you and I mentioned, because it's a huge business. Exchanges are massive. They touch millions of clients. They touch multiple regulators. They touch multiple liquidity providers and market makers, etc. So yes, there's a lot of touch points. When it comes to listing, so when you're in exchange, you look at two things. You look at a lot of things, of course, but you look at it primarily when it comes to listing, you look and many aspects of your business, you look at two things. One, it's a regulated business. You've got a license. You were granted and received the license in a specific jurisdiction, and that license can be taken away, revoked. Without that license, it's going to be impossible to do business in that jurisdiction. So the number one thing that you need to make sure is that you are not jeopardizing that license that your business depends on in that jurisdiction. You also need to make sure that so licenses versus regulator, also you're serving clients. So as an exchange, you have many, many, many clients. You want to ensure that they are getting the best experience and opportunity to execute what they want. So that would mean, if they want to buy Bitcoin, you want to be sure that you can provide markets in Bitcoin and you have sufficient Bitcoin to meet demand. If you want to introduce a new token that is not Bitcoin, you need to ensure that the same thing will happen there, that there will be sufficient liquidity, but also you want to know that team behind the project is really doing their best to succeed here. We've all been in the industry. We've all seen rug pulls. Your biggest fear is to list the rug pull. That's, as a gatekeeper, that's what you need to protect your client base against. And I think those are the two key things. Obviously, as an exchange, you also want to make money. They could be a great, cool project, but with no traction because it talks about transferring packets of data between Mars and Jupiter. And that might be nice, cool, but if there's no traction, it's not going to make, there's not going to be trading and there's not going to be any revenues. Therefore, you're not promoting your business.
Really interesting. So yeah, a few things to unpack there. So I guess the potential volume of trading that the project will attract, which comes down to how many people will be buying and trading and selling the token while it's listed, right? And number two, the longevity of it. I think that's really one of the biggest issues I find in the industry is people are too short-term minded. I think that again, we're really kind of prone to this supercharged ADHD industry. And maybe things move way too fast and people expect returns way too fast. And I actually believe in like building, not building slow, building fast, but that you don't need to be in a rush until you find product market fit. It's going to take a lot of iterations and a lot of pain to build something real. For that you need to have a high threshold of pain as an entrepreneur and as a team in general to really, for example, we built through the deep winter. And I see a lot of people that, give up easily and are expecting kind of like, they kind of see this gold rush and they just want to make a quick dollar. And I think even if they succeed in making a quick dollar, maybe trading memes and being an insider, they're actually don't end up feeling actually very fulfilled with the bags they might have made when you actually don't earn it, the hard way. So I really do believe in just that as an industry, we need to be more long-term minded and value fundamentals more. Yeah, I know Kraken is one of the exchanges that looks at quality. I think there's many exchanges, and we're an Asian-led industry in terms of where the trading volume comes from. But the US, what I've noticed as we go on our listing track is that the American exchanges really care for quality, and their due diligence is superior to maybe other jurisdictions. We won't name the rest. But one thing I wanted to ask you is, what we're working on, right? Which is this passport for the future of work enabled by blockchain. This on-chain reputation that becomes a dynamic identity, essentially making reputation the new resume, something that is interoperable, that travels with you across different jobs, and it's meant to cut through the noise. I know you've run a big company, you've hired a lot of people. I'd love to get from you, how did you find using your traditional hiring methods and talent acquisition methods while you were part of Kraken?
Like any big organization, Kraken employs over 2,000 people, has got a very robust and professional recruiting engine, team. And I believe that they would recruit 90% like most other companies would do, with some elements that are industry specific, so crypto specific. But at the end of the day, I think you know this, Ignacio, when you want to recruit someone, you go to LinkedIn, you ask for their bio, if you want to take it one step further, you do a background check, and you validate information. But in today's world, it's a lot harder to do that because a lot of workplaces are remote, right? In our industry, especially. And whether you're a new project, somewhere like with 5 employees, whether you're a project with 50 or whether you're over 2,000, like Kraken, Coinbase, and other exchanges, a lot of organizations employ remotely, and it's harder to validate some of the data when you do that. So I think new tools are needed. We discussed the 16 million fake LinkedIn accounts that LinkedIn had to delete, because in this day and age, it's a lot easier to invent a person, an entity, or details. And I think that the world has not yet the right tools for that. And I think that Bondex is building a very important tool that can definitely be of assistance or even pivotal in finding out whose reputation is trustworthy, or whose experience is real, and employing that bringing it into the employment process or recruitment process.
Amen. I fully agree. I mean, I think that we're using really archaic kind of infrastructure in the way that we build our professional identities, right? In a way, LinkedIn profiles are just another version, but in a digital way of the standard kind of PDF or printed out resume that one has, in which you see the brand names and you kind of filter through that and experience. But I think that just resumes just fall short of actually telling who someone is or their potential. It's not just also the amount of noise that is about to come to the market. There's always all these millions of accounts. In Web3, we see it with all the bots, but we're about to have AI agents all over the place. Telling who's real, who's not, who's a person, who's human, who's done what they said they claim they've done, that they've worked for, they say they've worked for, that they went to maybe the education or the hacking school or the coding school they went to, or the hackathon, or participated in a hackathon, or went to a certain conference. All these things are not going to be able to be validated on chain. And this really opens an avenue for a new type of infrastructure, and that's what we're building for. And I think that, as you were saying, the future of work, as we're more distributed in Web3 especially, right? I think it's an industry that started when it started to get bigger when COVID started. And so a lot of companies were distributed just by the circumstances versus more traditional models. And it was also an industry that was willing to try new things, right? I mean, Binance, the biggest exchange in the world, is fully distributed as a company, has hubs all over the place. But ultimately, people are working on a global scale, which is incredible to coordinate that many people versus the model, like when I did investment banking and we were like 7,000 people in a skyscraper in Canary Wharf in London. And ultimately, as things become more fractional and your jobs and gigs and projects become shorter and shorter, how do you capture that experience and build it into something that is verified and you can carry across with you and build over time? And you don't have to prove it all the time or be tested all the time, but you can actually accumulate it. And I think blockchain is a perfect technology to really enable that. And that's exactly what we're working for. That was a bit of a long rant. I do have one more question for you on the Kraken angle, Tal, which was
Just before Ignacio go on to the question, I think you're absolutely right. Listen, I can claim that I was whatever, right? I can claim I was the CEO of Coinbase. That would be relatively easy to verify. But what if I claim that I was something lower down the ladder that would be harder, or that so forget about employment, let's talk about education. And you rightly said that, right? I have a university degree from XYZ. I can probably prove it. I can personally because I have the diploma and I can ask you to write to the university. But this is a very cumbersome Web 2 way. So if you really wanted to know if I have a law degree out of the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, I can send you the degree. I may or may have not forged it. And then you can reach out to the university and ask if this is true, as you could to my prior employers and ask if I really did work there. This is a very cumbersome method of verifying. If you can solve that in a Web3 way, you can have a ZK wallet or any other reputation management tool, a credential, an NFT or anything that would allow you to say, hey, this person really did work there. And here's a badge that is issued by the employer and verified by either the employer or Bondex or whatever. And that would really save a lot of effort and friction in verifying that the person has worked in a specific, has learned in a specific, a specific degree. These were the grades. Did this professional education course outside of university, and all these factors. But I think that right now the Web 2 system, which is the leading system and the best that exists at the moment, is just very, very slow and antiquated and works for the old world, not for the Web 3 world.
we're fully aligned. Absolutely. People don't realize how expensive background checks actually are. When a company gets to the final stages of hiring and they run those background checks, and then if something comes out as false, then they've wasted all this time, which time equals is actually more valuable than money. And they have to restart the process again to find that person. In the meantime, or they hire the wrong person and there's a lot of turnover. It's really a massive pain point. So if you could just have an on-chain codified resume that is dynamic and travels with you across the internet and your jobs and your professional career, we'd be really, really having the right infrastructure for the future of work. That leads me actually to my next question, which is the other thing that I find in terms of, especially in Web3, we're a bigger paradox because we're all about privacy and anonymity. Everyone likes to kind of anon and not be doxxed and this and that and the other. I'm not that way. I have, I'm very public facing. But we meet on meetups and conferences around the world. You and I have run into each other at many of these in Web3. There's one going on today in New York. Solana is having one, right? Next week will be maybe ECC. And so we like to meet up in person in real life almost every week of it. There's one going on around the world related to Web3, which is quite a paradox. And that actually speaks to me to something that AI will never be able to replace, which is human relationships and human connection and actually knowing each other on a personal basis versus just online. People are more than wallets. We want to meet each other. How would you say you would value, or maybe first in another way, the relationships that you've built while you've been in the industry? How many of them have been built actually in person by going to conferences, meetups, being a speaker, meeting on a personal level in real life versus, kind of on Zoom calls or digitally or by email or all the digital communication that we do?
I think it's a great question. So we as a species are very social beings. So I think that whenever most of us, for most of us, whenever we have a chance to meet with someone that we have something in common, I think that would be our preferred interaction. Of course, in a world where we all live in different places, different time zones, it's less practical to meet physically. So we meet on Zoom or we meet via on Telegram or on email or whatever that is, or whatever communication platform. But I'm a big believer. I'm a people person. So for me, it's all about the people. I love meeting the people. I love talking to them. You get, and that's the first time we met, it was we spoke a ton of times before on calls, on video calls. But when you meet a person, when you sit down with a person, it's totally different. You get to see other stuff. Usually, you look at stuff that is beyond the immediate, okay, I have an agenda for this call. Let's get it through and move to the next call. But you actually have an opportunity to connect to a person. So for me, the stronger relationships were in meeting people. And if I'm building a strong relationship with someone over these platforms, over digital platforms, I would try to meet. So I would try to look for the opportunity to meet them in the next conference, on my next travel, because I think one, it's a human thing. We want to connect and meet people. And two, it's also part of getting deep in the relationship. And there's an element of, trust, etc. You probably heard of people that wouldn't do business if they with you, if they can't shake your hand or see or look you in the eye. I think there's a lot to that. Sure, if I want to buy something for $5 from you, I don't really need to meet you. But if I want to do something much more substantial than a $5 purchase, then I would want to meet you and I would want to see who I'm interacting with.
Absolutely. That's why, as much as, I follow with excitement everything that is happening in the AI space and all the innovation that's going on, I still keep telling myself you will never be able to replace human connection, human relationships. That's what runs the world and that's what actually runs businesses. Nothing happens unless you find the right stakeholder and organization to actually close a deal, a partnership, collaborate. It's a crucial part of business and humanity that is never going to go away. And
And that's never say never, because I'm also deep into, I love technology. I'm also deep into AI and humanoid robots. At some point in the future, whether it's 50 years, 15 years, or 5 years, or anything in the middle, there is a good chance that we would be able to meet a humanoid robot that would look, act, feel. Right now, you can get an AI program to pass the Turing test. So if you didn't see who's on the other side, you might think that it's a human. Do I see that as something that might happen? Yes. Am I looking forward to it? No, I prefer to meet humans than humanoid robots, but I'd say never.
it's going to be interesting. We're living in a super, super exciting time. They're saying that we're like 5 years away from this, convergence or this exponential kind of curve into what AI and humanoids, et cetera, is going to happen. And it's going to have really, really big impacts into what actually humanity's purpose, right? Fulfillment a lot of times comes from what you do, when you wake up in the morning and your purpose. A lot of people, part of their identity is what they do as a job, right? As a profession, as their career, as they develop, right? If this, I'm not part of this. I actually don't believe in all this doom saying, maybe we end up with 3-day weekends and golfing become, and people end up doing way more sports and get into, hobbies become a massive industry. And then there's more jobs in entertainment, and things will balance each other out. Um, but it's certainly going to be interesting. But that actually goes to my point. We are actually going to appreciate humanity even more. And I think a lot of people are going to want to know, what's an AI, what's an agent, what's a humanoid, and what's a real person. And even though we might be fooled because it seems like a real person, I don't know about you, but for example, my LinkedIn inbox is beginning to look exactly the same in terms of the messages or the cold emails that I get on my inbox all the time nowadays. They're all starting to sound the same, and it's because they've all been written by one of the AI models, whether it's ChatGPT or Llama or Gemini, and they sound exactly the same with a little bit of customization, not enough to fool me, and automatically turns me off because it doesn't make me feel special. I think we're really going to go from this attention, overwhelming data driven economy to a trust and authenticity economy. And we're nearing the end of the session. And we want to go into Q&A. So David, our host, if we can move on to Q&A, maybe bring a few of the listeners who want to raise their hands and ask a few questions to either Tal or me.
Like, my question here is about the season. Are they going to be continuous continuously like the seasons? Because currently we are in season 2. So I mean, are there going to be more seasons, or just gonna be just this first and second season?
My God. You're talking about the airdrop, the season airdrops. The idea is for we have a really, really solid token economy model that really fits well into our products and services. A bridge that our revenue model replenishes the ecosystem rewards pool and enables periodic airdrops in perpetuity, right? As long as the business does well, it keeps growing, keeps generating revenues based on real problems, talent acquisition, networking, CRMs, um, then we will have more and more airdrops. And the requirements to be able to actually participate in those airdrops will require you to add value to the network. It's a meritocracy. But, I know that everyone's excited about the TGE, but we're not going to have Tal as a guest maybe ever again. And we're very lucky to have him. He was the CEO of Kraken, one of the most renowned exchanges in the world. So let's let Web3 Coach do one more question. And I'm hoping it's one for Tal,
Uh,
our
I
guest today.
I have one more question, please.
Okay, sure.
Oh, please, one more question, please.
Okay, we'll give you one more chance.
Yeah, I really need more clarity on it. Also about the TGE, the airdrop.
Yeah, so I could barely understand you, but we're token launching the first week of June. And there's going to be more announcements made by the lead exchange coming up next week or even a few days before. They have to be the ones to announce first. And with this, we will conclude today's session. Tal, I want to thank you for your for sharing us all your knowledge, um, and for being an advisor and a supporter of Bondex for such a long time. Thank you so much for coming today and sharing all your experience with us.
Ignacio, thank you very much. And thank you, community, for joining and being so supportive. I think you're building something amazing. I think your timing, we're in a great crypto season right now. Crypto is back. We're looking at things that are very positive. But there's a lot of crypto adoption. I'm not only talking about price action. I'm talking about adoption, real usage, and real use cases that help people do more things in the world using blockchain technology. So Bondex is a great example for that. And I really salute the hard work that you've been doing over the years and building throughout winters and throughout the hard times. And as you said, being an entrepreneur is super hard. In building, you have now good product market fit. You're adding value to people. So I'll be super excited to see how you progress on the next stage of the journey. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ignacio, and good luck.
Thank you, Tal. I appreciate the kind words. We've been building for a long time. It's an exciting window in time. I agree. I think it's, the storm is brewing for the perfect conditions, and it's a time for Bondex to shine. I'm very, very excited. Thank you to all the community for coming today. And thank you, Tal, for your time. Have a fantastic week, everyone. News coming soon.